So I'll begin by just saying that, I identify as a person on the path of discovery. And sometimes I'll say I'm a person on the path of discovery in recovery. To me, it's all the same thing. Recovery is yoga. Movement from disconnection into connection. Movement from darkness into light. Movement from confusion to clarity. Movement from addiction to freedom. It's all the same process. That movement, that transformation that each of us is undergoing. We can refer to it as recovery, that's fine. We could refer to it as a religion, a spirituality, a path of becoming. We can call it recovery or yoga, or we call it anything. Just like we can choose our own higher power. I feel the important thing is to just recognize that we are human beings on this path because we've chosen to be here. We've chosen to be on this path. We're choosing it right now. It's not thrust upon us by accident, but we are engaging with it because we've come to the enlightened moment of a bottom. And that's what each of us share. We share many things. One of them is we have known the feeling of being at a bottom. And that's a sacred place. And not everybody gets to visit that sacred place. It's very special. And what coming to a bottom allows you to do is, in that moment, to tell the truth. A bottom is nothing more than a moment when you're finally ready to tell the truth. And so each of us has been there. And we have seen our stories shattered upon the rocks. And it has been painful and difficult as we have had to adopt a new way of being in the world when we didn't know how to do that. We only knew we couldn't go on the way we were going and something had to change, but we didn't know yet how to bring that change into being. And that is the path of recovery, and it lasts precisely the rest of your life. So I'm on this path of discovery, and what that means for me is I'm committed to the present moment and to finding truth. Those two things, the present moment and truth. The reason I call it a path of discovery is because if you're truly in the present moment, you have absolutely no idea what's coming next. You can't predict it. You're in the unknown. It's only when you future trip that you are in the illusion of being able to predict what's about to come. Or if you're stuck in the past, based upon your history, your memory, you can say, I can predict a future, but you will not be in the present moment. The present moment is truly the unknown. So to step into the present moment means, by definition, you are on a path of discovery, one moment to the next, one breath to the next. It takes great courage to do that because it's challenging, frightening, difficult to be in the present moment and to commit to stepping into the unknown moment to moment. There are many reasons why people turn to substances or other addictive behaviors. There's depression, which means that somebody had not found a way to express, so they became repressed and depressed. There's rage and anger that results. There's confusion and frustration. These are reasons why people turn to substance and addictive behaviors, because the present moment to those people appear intolerable. So rather than step into the unknown, rather than be here now and feel and experience and learn and move through, It's a little bit thanks, but no thanks. It's saying to the universe, yes, but no. Not really. I'd rather do this my way. Thank you. Not so into this present moment stuff. For me, the reason that I turn to substances is now very clear. And I could sum it up for you in one word: anxiety. Anxiety. So I was born into an argument. My mother and father were at it. And by the time I was 1, they were divorced. So that first year of my life, I was born into an argument. And I believe that an infant is very aware of something being wrong. As I grew up, and through my childhood, as a small child, and then later on in my adolescent years, what I can reflect to you is to tell you that the way that I knew myself was anxious, hyperactive. My way of dealing with anxiety in the early days was constant movement. Never stop. Athletics, sports, literally running through my house, like bouncing off the walls. A crazy, an atrocious sugar-filled diet. So sugar. So the way that I look at it is baseline is anxiety. That's how I understand myself. I'm going to do something to fix that problem. What I'm going to do is I'm going to reach out to something, and it really doesn't matter what it is. But I'm going to reach out to something to relieve me of this anxiety. And I'm going to get high. We'll call it just getting high, right? And then I'm going to crash. And when I crash, I'm going to return back to my baseline. And my baseline is anxiety. Just nod if you understand what I'm talking about. Okay. The challenge with this is this can repeat itself for a lifetime. Anxiety, reach out, get high, crash, return to anxiety. Reach out, get high, crash, return to anxiety. It doesn't matter that it was heroin or cocaine, alcohol, sex, gambling, technology, alcohol in all of its forms. It doesn't matter what the behavior is. It's just a behavior. It's just a behavior which helped you to navigate the core reason why the present moment was so uncomfortable for you. And for me, that was anxiety. Now, I didn't know that. I just bounced around, and people would say, my God, you really never stop moving. My parents would say, please calm down, sit down for a minute. I didn't have that ability. And so the challenge with this rhythm of reach out, get high, crash, return to anxiety is you never break through the anxiety. You never break out of that core condition. You never get to know yourself. You never get to enjoy a present moment. Never. That means for a lifetime, until this challenge is faced, for a lifetime, you're chasing. Always something. Always chasing something, and the mind remains in a particular kind of loop. Avoid pain, recreate pleasure. Avoid pain, recreate pleasure. You could only know how to avoid pain or recreate pleasure by looking into your memory banks. This was painful. I don't want to do it again. I want to avoid that at all costs. Oh, that was pleasurable. Let's repeat that experiment. I'm looking back. Where am I? I'm in the past. Attached to memories, emotional and otherwise, which are propelling and compelling my behavior into certain things. And I'm repeating. Return to anxiety. The irony is that in stillness, over time, the anxiety calms. And you didn't even need to figure out what the cause of the original anxiety was. Whatever that story was, I was born into an argument. Okay. Well, I'm an adult now. I don't want that argument to be affecting me for the rest of my life. It wasn't even my argument. So the anxiety starts to dissipate. Before that, it's like an itch that you can never scratch. Scratching at it, you can never get deep enough. And so you continue to chase, continue to chase, continue to chase. Chase what? Anything, everything. Chase something different than what is, by any means necessary. Something different than what is, by any means necessary. And that's so painful. And we never get to know who we are, what we could be. We're not on a path of discovery. We're on a path of stuckness in a pattern that we don't fully understand, in memories that aren't completely accurate or true, keeping us stuck in a force field of addiction. This is what we're up against, one day at a time. So to break out of that, at some point, we reached a bottom. Things got so bad that we couldn't go on anymore, even though we didn't know any other way. A lifetime of reaching out, getting high, crashing, and returning to baseline anxiety. Terrifying. The more you avoid the present moment, the more terrified you are of it. The more you crave the future, the more you crave something different, the more you go after, chase something else than what is becomes terrifying. But it's not actually terrifying, it's just that your mind has created this massive story. If I stop moving, if I really slow down, if I put down these drugs and alcohol, if I stop acting out sexually, if I stop chasing something in this world, what would I be? Who would I be if I wasn't actually chasing anything? And for most people, that's a very scary thing. You think you want the ride to stop, but you really don't want the ride to stop. And so what happens when the ride really stops? You guys saw The Matrix. So you're, like in The Matrix, you're in the white room, the construct. You don't know what's coming down the pipe. All possibility, all potential. But there's nothing there yet. You're in this interesting state of limbo. For me, that took place in treatment. Drug and alcohol treatment. Hazelden, went to Hazelden in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And a new construct came in for me. A new way of being. At first, all it was, for a number of years of my recovery, all it really was exercise, go to meetings, speak to your sponsor, and then eventually, finally, do the steps. I stayed sober for a year after treatment. I relapsed for a year, and then I got sober for the last time on June 23rd, 1991. So this year I'll be 30 years, which is exciting for me. I'm going to make a big celebration out of that. But those 2 years of get sober, then relapse, and then finally get sober, those 2 years were floaty, kind of floaty years. I haven't really yet established myself in recovery. Yes, I'm going to meetings, And the way I looked at my recovery at that time was, here's my life. I'm going to leave my life. I'm going to go over here to a meeting. I'm going to check the box when we're done with the meeting, and then I'll return to my life. And that's a very compartmentalized way to look at things. My life is not separate from anything that I do, or anything that I do is not separate from my life. Once recovery became integrated into my life as something that, like, I would follow this path, and this path would lead me to wonderful places, and I would experience great challenge along the way as well. Once that became a part of my life, then I started to get momentum. This being a part of my life, I could do things like call my sponsor every day. Why? Because that's what I do. This is a part of my life. Get to a meeting every day. Why would you do that? Because I get to connect with other people on the same path as me. Read the book, Alcoholics Anonymous, or Narcotics Anonymous Basic Text, or Adult Children of Alcoholics, the Red Book, or any of them. Why would I read that text? Because it's a sacred spiritual text that supports me in a movement forward where? Into connection, union, love, presence. It is daily breaking me out of my rhythm of this nonsense. I'm breaking out of my routine of I'm anxious, get high, crash, return to anxious. No, not allowed to do that anymore. Now it's I'm anxious. Let me call somebody and tell them about it. Let me get to a meeting and learn about other people's anxiety and realize, oh, this isn't just me. We have this thing together. And the best news, there's a way through that where you don't have to repeat this for the rest of your life. And then after getting the massive transformation that I was looking for through the 12 steps, I should just quickly comment on that, and then I don't know how much time I have left, but I'll try to wrap it up. I could go a long, long time. Okay. So we talk a lot about the promises as they're laid out in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous or many other texts, the promises. There are theoretically sort of 12 of them, but for me there was only one. There was only one thing I was after. Make it stop. Please make it stop. Now, what did I mean by that? I didn't mean I don't want to think anymore. What I meant was I want the war inside of me to end. I want the war to end. I don't want to be in conflict with myself anymore. I feel like I'm in conflict all the time in early recovery. Why? One part of me really knows this is the right place to be. I'm in the right place. And I know this is leading to a good thing, even though it's uncomfortable. The other part of me wants to use drugs and alcohol, period. There's one fight. That's one of many fights. But I want that fight to be over. I don't want to be thinking for the rest of my life, will I get high today? Should I get high today? Maybe, just going through it in my mind. I don't want to be in that game anymore. Make it stop. And the people around me said, it will stop. It will stop. But you won't know when it happens. You can't predict when this is going to happen. You just have to do it. You got to keep coming back. You got to do the things we're asking you to do. Open yourself up to be helpful to other people. And it will happen for you. And after I got through my 9th step, which is where they talk about the promises, lo and behold, I woke up one day and I could not remember the last time I thought about using drugs and alcohol. Just couldn't remember. And I all of a sudden realized that I was free from that. And from that moment, which must have been about 9 months into my recovery, sometime in my first year, but after completing through the 9th step, and then I went on to to take many, 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 many people through the steps over the years. And it served me in the biggest way. And I've never, ever, in 29 years, thought about using drugs and alcohol. Just hasn't ever come back. Now, that's a beautiful thing. That war, it's done. One day at a time. It's finished. But there would be other wars. There would be many, 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 many other wars. Anger, greed, judgment, lust, self-centeredness, all the things about being human were not just done because I was able to be freed from drug and alcohol addiction. That's when the work began for me. And then step in yoga. So the 12 steps, foundation, laid the foundation of my life. A way to be rigorously honest, a way to deal with resentment as it arises, a willingness always to help, a willingness always to apologize and to clean up messes that I make even now in my life. Those principles never stop being valid. Those are spiritual principles. They're beyond a human being. They're beyond us. That's like a decision. I live that way now because of the 12 steps, because they're embedded into the cells of my body. They're embedded into my DNA. And so people would say, do you work the steps? It's like every second. It's happening right now. Of course. Oh, what are you doing? I'm like, you're looking at it. It's not necessarily about reading a book and doing writing, although that's part of it sometimes. But yoga, the physical practice of yoga, breath work, kriya, that's a very big word, kriya, K-R-I-Y-A, kriya, kriya, evolutionary right action. Evolutionary right action. Doing something that leads to your evolution. That's every day. That's an everyday thing for me. And that means powerful practices, physical, getting deep into this body, detoxifying, sweating, breath work. Very intense sometimes, very mellow other times. Deep meditation, super silent, super still, super internal. Relating to myself, beyond anxiety, beyond my stories, beyond all the things I tell myself about what I think is and what I think I am and what I think this body is. My dad used to say to me, he was at the end of his life, he was an older man, he was not in particularly good shape. And he'd say, I can't begin to describe to you what happens when I look in the mirror. He'd say, how did this happen? How did this happen to me? Like I'm here, I'm a 16-year-old boy, he'd tell me. He's like, I was 16 a minute ago, he would tell me. And I look and how did this happen? And what he was sharing with me was very real wisdom about the eternal nature of consciousness, which has no age and no time, and his body, which is going to decay and eventually dissolve and become something else. And he was talking to me about that at the end of his life. And I'm looking at myself on screen here right with you right now, and I'm like, how did this happen? Jesus, I had black hair a second ago. Didn't I? What? Wow, I had a gray beard? Fuck, we're going to shave that thing off later today. That's ego. That's ego not understanding that this body is not you. You have to go deeper than that, and you have to understand that this body is going, but the part of you that matters the most isn't, And that's the part that you want to be connecting with on a daily basis. And that's the part of you that's connected to higher power that runs through you. As you see it, not as I see it. As you relate to it. So yoga came into the picture and helped me to overcome one by one, day by day, one day at a time, these other addictions, these other tendencies to act out in this way or another way. And yoga really helped me to get a deeper detoxification. And I want to just end on this note. The heroin addict has to physically detox off of heroin in order to begin the process that we're talking about. Until that person is detoxed, they're unable to move forward. There's a stuckness there that is physical, very gross in nature. But after that person detoxes off of heroin and they move along the path of discovery, they're going to have many, 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 many more detoxes. Each one more subtle, more subtle, more subtle, more gentle, more subtle than the next. So they'll go through an emotional detox. Many. Maybe they're holding some grief in their body and they are not aware of it. Talk about an itch that you can't scratch. So they're holding grief in the body and they're not aware of it. And what happens is they become aware of it through a practice. And then it's in their face and they can see it. And this is the next lesson plan for them. They have to work on that because why? It's showed up in the present moment. And they can't avoid it and look for something else. It's like, no, this is here now. I'm on the path of discovery. This is what showed up. My response ability is here now. Have to do that. And then you process this, and that's a deeper detox. So the way I'm looking at recovery these days is as a movement from the very gross all the way down to the very subtle. Down to the very subtle. At first, when I got sober, I liked adventure. I wanted things with impact. I want impact because that's what my nervous system is attuned to. But as I go down the road, bit by bit, and my teacher told me, Tommy, you need to become thrilled by the subtle. You need to become thrilled by the subtle. Thrilled by the subtle, which is why I said at the beginning, after Angela's centering practice for us, that's where the action is. I meant it. That is where the action is if you're attuned to that. And then you become thrilled just by closing your eyes, relating to yourself and taking a deep breath. And everything that you need, you recognize everything that you need is here and now. Everything you need is here and now. Everything you need is here and now. And you'll never need anything else except the here and the now. And if you stay there and work with the discomfort, lean into it, then you will find yourself in a kind of life that has no description. You can't describe it. You're in the flow of the entire universe. And there's no addiction there. And each day, you can be knocked off your center. Even though the day before you were in the flow of the universe, you still have to realize the next day, you could be knocked flat on your ass. That's why we always come back to, we can access the flow of the universe, but we can only do it one day at a time. And we have to keep doing it. We have to stay in our practice, stay in our practice, stay in our practice. And that's the work that we do at Recovery 2.0. And it's joyful and hopeful and effective. And I will end on that note. Thank you so much.